I was smiling for the cameras, the perfect family photo frozen on every phone screen, but inside I felt like a shadow, a guest in my own life. Then, as I slipped into the restroom, a stranger's voice cracked my world open. "Your stepmother put something in your drink." My heart stopped. In that moment, I made a choice, quiet, invisible, but deadly. I switched the glasses. Minutes later, when laughter turned into gasps, I realized I had just uncovered a truth so poisonous it would destroy everything we pretended to be. And I was no longer safe. The hall glittered with chandeliers, the kind of light that made everything look expensive and flawless. Guests filled the room, their laughter blending with the music of a live band. My brother Michael and his wife stood in the center, radiant under the spotlight. 10 years of marriage, a perfect love story, or at least that was what everyone was eager to believe. The entire evening was being live-streamed, comments pouring in from relatives across the country, praising the strength of our beautiful family. Vivian, my stepmother, orchestrated every detail. She moved gracefully through the crowd, her designer gown shimmering like liquid gold, her smile perfectly rehearsed for the cameras. She paused near the cake, tilted her head just enough, and snapped another photo for her social media. Within minutes, I could already hear the pings from her phone. Hearts, likes, congratulations. To them, she was the queen who held our family together. I stood slightly apart, trying to blend into the wallpaper. When the photographer motioned for a family picture, Vivian's arm wrapped lightly around my shoulder. To the camera, it looked affectionate, but her nails dug slightly into my skin, a tiny reminder of where I belonged, just outside the circle of love. I smiled on cue, my face glowing under the flash. If anyone were to zoom in later, perhaps they would notice that my eyes were hollow, searching for something I never found in this family. As the music swelled, my father raised a glass. "To Michael and Rachel," he said proudly, "the future of this family." His voice carried across the room and everyone applauded. I joined in, clapping softly, though inside I felt myself shrink even further. My father's words were a reminder. I was never the future. I was the afterthought. Moments later, I approached the buffet, hoping to distract myself with food, when my father appeared beside me. His brows were knitted tightly. "Emily, you're late," he said in a low but sharp voice. "Do you have any idea how this looks, walking in after the speeches?" "I was only 5 minutes late," I whispered. "That's 5 minutes too many," he snapped before brushing past me to join Michael. His hand landed on my brother's shoulder, pride beaming across his face. Michael laughed, raising his glass high, his wife glowing beside him. "Don't worry, Dad. Emily has always had her ways." The guests chuckled politely. Heat crept up my neck, my throat tightening as if the room itself had shrunk around me. I turned, only to find Vivian watching me from across the room. Her smile was radiant, but her eyes were glacial. She approached, the clink of her heels striking the marble floor in a rhythm that matched my racing pulse. "Darling," she said sweetly, placing a hand on my arm, "you look so beautiful tonight." "Thank you," I replied cautiously. She tilted her head, eyes glinting. "Of course, Rachel does make such a stunning partner for Michael, doesn't she? They're truly perfect together, the kind of couple people envy." Her words slipped like venom wrapped in silk. "You should be happy for them." "I am," I said, though the hollowness in my voice betrayed me. Vivian's smile widened. "Sometimes I think you misunderstand me. I only want what's best for you, Emily. You're so sensitive, always taking things the wrong way." Gaslighting. That was her favorite game. Twisting words, warping reality until I began to question whether I was imagining everything. She pressed her hand more firmly against mine. "I love you as my own, you know that." I forced a nod, the lie hanging heavy between us. For years, she had perfected this performance. Warmth in public, ice in private. The waiter approached, carrying a tray of crystal glasses filled with wine. Vivian reached out with delicate fingers, handing one directly to me. "Here," she said, her smile dazzling. The camera near the stage shifted, catching her hand lingering on the stem of the glass. I hesitated, just for a moment, then accepted. Around me, the party swirled, laughter, toasts, music. To everyone else, it was a flawless evening, but in my hands, I held something that felt heavier than it should. The glass sparkled in the light, the liquid crimson and inviting. Vivian's gaze lingered on me, just long enough to make my skin prickle. She leaned closer, her breath warm against my ear. "Don't be so serious tonight, Emily. Smile. The world is watching." I raised the glass to my lips, my hand trembling slightly. And in that instant, as the camera panned across the room, it lingered on Vivian's hand, still resting on the edge of the tray, frozen for just a fraction too long. A detail so subtle no one else noticed, but I did. And in that moment, I felt it. Something was wrong. I sat at the long dining table, my seat tucked in the far corner as if I had been placed there deliberately. The others laughed in clusters, leaning toward each other, sharing inside jokes. My plate remained untouched, my fork resting idly beside the salad. No one looked my way. No one asked if I was enjoying myself. I might as well have been invisible. Across the room, Vivian whispered into Aunt Clara's ear. Their eyes flicked toward me, then quickly away. I caught fragments of her words, sharp as glass. "Emily always embarrasses her father. She doesn't know how to act in public." Clara nodded, her lips curling in pity. Within minutes, those words spread like smoke, finding their way to cousins, uncles, aunts. Smiles grew tighter when they passed me. Conversations fell silent when I drew near. I tried to convince myself it didn't matter, but the weight of their stares pressed against my chest until breathing became a conscious effort. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was always the one ruining things. My hands trembled as I reached for my glass of water, but even that small motion felt scrutinized. My gaze wandered, desperate for an anchor, until it landed on a framed photograph propped near the cake table. It was from years ago. My father, Michael, and me on a summer picnic. My mother's arm was around me then, her smile radiant. She was gone now, replaced by Vivian in every family frame that decorated the house. A lump formed in my throat. I excused myself quietly, slipping away from the table before the tears could betray me. In the hallway outside the banquet hall, the noise dulled to a distant hum. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes, willing my breath to steady. But the image of my childhood photo clung to me, fragile and painful. My mother's absence felt sharper than ever, as if she were the missing piece of armor I desperately needed tonight. I wiped at my eyes and moved toward the restroom, hoping a splash of cold water would wash away the heaviness pressing down on me. The door closed behind me, muffling the sound of celebration. I leaned over the sink, staring at my reflection. My makeup was flawless, my hair perfectly arranged, but my eyes told a different story. Hollow, desperate, alone. The restroom door creaked open. A woman slipped inside, her steps careful, almost hesitant. I didn't recognize her at first, perhaps a guest from my brother's side of the family. She glanced around before leaning closer to me. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of 1,000 alarms. "Your stepmother put something in your drink." The world tilted. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, drowning out the hum of the party beyond the walls. "What?" I asked, my voice cracking. "She touched your glass," the woman said firmly, her eyes steady on mine. "I saw her. She slipped something in. You need to be careful." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The glass in my hand earlier, the way Vivian's fingers lingered on its stem, her eyes watching me too closely, everything connected in a terrifying instant. I staggered back, gripping the counter for balance. My thoughts raced, colliding into each other in chaos. Vivian couldn't have gone that far. Could she? The woman's expression darkened, her voice trembling with urgency. "Listen to me. Switch glasses. Do it quietly. Don't let anyone notice. And whatever happens, don't drink from that glass." Her words carved themselves into my mind. Switch the glasses. Quietly. My hands shook as I left the restroom, my face pale under the chandelier's glow. My seat waited for me at the corner of the table, the glass of wine still glistening red under the light. I sat down slowly, forcing my breath to appear steady. Vivian's gaze swept across the room, locking onto mine. She smiled again, serene, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a spark of something sharper. The band struck up another melody. Guests raised their glasses in another toast. My fingers curled around the stem of mine, slick with sweat. And then, with deliberate care, I moved. I swapped my glass with the one beside me, the motion smooth, hidden by the clinking and laughter. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a countdown. No one seemed to notice. Not Michael, not my father, not Vivian. The glasses had been switched. I exhaled silently, my lungs aching from holding my breath. But the dread didn't leave me. It deepened, like a storm waiting just beyond the horizon. Vivian's glass was now in front of her. She reached for it with graceful fingers, her eyes glancing briefly at me before lifting it to her lips. The camera, still recording for the live stream, panned slowly across the table, catching her hand wrapped around the glass. For a fraction of a second, the lens lingered there, frozen on the stem, as if it, too, sensed the gravity of what was about to unfold. And in that pause, the question burned through me. Would she drink it? The room buzzed with clinking glasses and cheers, the music swelling into another triumphant melody. Vivian raised her glass gracefully, her movements captured by dozens of phones still streaming the event. Her lips touched the rim, the red liquid sliding past in a single sip. She set the glass down, flawless as ever, her smile poised for the watching crowd. For 20 minutes, nothing seemed unusual. The chatter continued, the laughter rising louder as the wine flowed. I tried to breathe normally, but every tick of the clock clawed at my chest. My eyes never left her. She laughed with my father, whispered something into Michael's ear, all while stealing subtle glances at me, as though she knew what I had done. Then, suddenly, her hand trembled. A fork clattered against the table. Vivian pressed her fingers to her throat, her smile shattering. At first, the guests chuckled, assuming it was some playful gesture. But her face twisted, her body convulsed, and a guttural sound escaped her lips. Gasps echoed across the hall. A scream erupted. Chairs screeched backward as people rose in panic. Vivian collapsed against the table, knocking over plates, her body jerking violently. The live stream caught every second, the wide eyes, the chaos, the collective horror. Viewers watching in real time flooded the comments. "What's happening? Someone help her! Call an ambulance!" Michael leapt forward, catching his stepmother before she hit the floor. "Mom!" he shouted, voice cracking. My father rushed to her side, his face pale, his hands trembling as he shook her shoulders. "Vivian, stay with us!" I stood frozen, my heart thundering so loud it drowned the chaos. Around me, phones lifted higher, recording, broadcasting the collapse of our perfect family to thousands of strangers online. Vivian's lips foamed, her eyes rolled back, and she lay limp in my father's arms. Then, like a storm breaking, the room turned on me. "She touched her glass!" a voice shouted. "I saw Emily near it earlier." Dozens of heads swiveled toward me, suspicion sharpening their faces. Cousins whispered, uncles pointed. Someone's phone zoomed in, capturing my stunned expression. Within seconds, the comments on the live stream shifted. "Is that her? The daughter? Did she do something?" "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "I didn't." Michael's eyes locked onto mine, blazing with fury. "You were the last one near her drink." His voice rose above the panic, damning me before the world. "I didn't touch it," I stammered, though my words felt weak, swallowed by the roar of accusation. "Enough!" my father shouted, his voice raw. His eyes burned into me, darker than I'd ever seen. "What did you do, Emily?" The weight of his stare pierced me, more crushing than any word. For years I had craved his approval, even a sliver of affection. And now, under the glow of the chandeliers and the merciless eyes of the cameras, all I saw was hatred. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, but my throat constricted. The truth hung unsaid, invisible among the tidal wave of voices condemning me. Security was called. Two men gripped my arms, pulling me away from the chaos. Guests hissed as I passed, their gazes sharp with disgust. Phones followed, recording my walk of shame. Outside the hall, the night air hit me like ice, but it did nothing to calm the fire in my chest. They shoved me toward the side entrance, the music of the party now a muffled echo. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the steps, burying my face in my hands. Tears burned, spilling hot down my cheeks. Maybe they're right, I thought bitterly. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe I really was born to be unwanted, to be hated, to ruin everything. The thought hollowed me, cutting deeper than the accusations. I wrapped my arms around myself, rocking gently as if trying to hold together the pieces of a life unraveling too fast. Somewhere inside, a pianist struck a mournful tune, soft notes leaking into the night. The music reached me faintly, tender and sorrowful, a cruel contrast to the chaos that had just erupted. The melody pulled me inward to every moment of silence at family dinners, every birthday overshadowed, every cruel comparison that had carved away at me. My tears fell freely now, each one a confession. I was broken. Then, through the blur of tears, I felt it, a hand, light but steady, settling on my shoulder. I flinched, my heart seizing in fear. Slowly, I lifted my head, my breath caught in my throat. A figure stood behind me, half hidden in shadow. The light from the hall spilled just enough to outline her face, her eyes fixed intently on mine. "Emily," she whispered, her voice calm yet urgent. I froze, my pulse pounding. Who was she? And why did her eyes look like they carried a truth I wasn't ready to face? The woman's hand lingered on my shoulder, steadying me as if she'd known me for years. Her face softened in the dim light, and when she spoke, it was not with accusation, but with something heavier, truth. "My name is Margaret," she said, her voice low. "I knew your father long before Vivian came along. I was his partner once, until she destroyed everything." Her words pierced me, sharp enough to slice through my despair. I blinked, trying to make sense of what she meant. "Destroyed?" I whispered. Margaret nodded. "Vivian wanted your father, his name, his wealth, his family. I stood in the way. She spread lies, twisted stories, and one day he turned his back on me. It was all too easy for her. She knew exactly which strings to pull." Her eyes glistened with memories that looked too painful to carry. "I was erased, just like she's been trying to erase you." The pieces slammed into place. The whispers, the comparisons, the cold stares, the poisoned glass, none of it was new. It was her pattern, her method. Vivian hadn't simply targeted me because of who I was. She had always thrived on removing obstacles. I was just the latest. Anger surged within me, not the wildfire of panic, but a steady burn, the kind that gave clarity. For the first time, I saw the shape of the cage I'd been locked inside my whole life. And for the first time, I wanted to break it. Margaret leaned closer. "And your brother, Michael." She promised him everything if he stayed loyal to her. She dangled inheritance, the estate, your father's trust. He may not even realize how much she's manipulated him, but he's been playing into her hands. The ground seemed to shift beneath me. Michael, the brother I'd once admired, had chosen Vivian not out of love, but out of greed. The betrayal cut deeper than any insult could. I pressed my palms against my temples, the room spinning. "So it's all been lies," I murmured. "All of it," Margaret said softly. "But lies can be unraveled." That night, after the chaos had been contained and Vivian was rushed to the hospital, I slipped back into the house under the veil of silence. The celebration had ended in scandal, guests dispersing with rumors buzzing on their phones. My father and Michael were gone, following Vivian, leaving the house eerily quiet. I moved quickly, heart pounding, driven by something greater than fear. Her study was locked, but locks had never been much of an obstacle. I searched the drawers, the cabinets, the closet. My fingers brushed against a small locked box tucked behind a row of expensive shoes. Inside, I found receipts. One in particular froze my blood. A pharmacy purchase dated just days before for a rare chemical, something lethal in the wrong hands. The evidence sat in my shaking hands, heavy as a confession. This was no accident. This was deliberate. Vivian had meant for me to drink it. I clutched the paper tightly, the fury inside me hardening into resolve. For years, I had been her victim, her scapegoat. Tonight, that ended. The next morning, I began gathering everything I could. I combed through her emails on a laptop she thought was secure, finding trails of transactions that led to offshore accounts. Bank statements revealed transfers timed perfectly with each charitable donation she flaunted in public. There were text messages, too, hidden on an old phone, where she taunted someone about how easy it was to turn my father against me. Piece by piece, the puzzle formed into a picture too damning to ignore, but I knew evidence alone wouldn't save me. I needed allies. I reached out to Uncle Peter, the only relative who had never quite bent to Vivian's charm. He listened quietly as I showed him the receipts, the texts, the statements. For the first time, someone believed me without hesitation. His eyes hardened, and he agreed to stand with me when the time came. Still, the nights were the hardest. I sat alone in my room, pen trembling in my hand as I wrote in my journal. The words spilled out jagged and raw: fear, betrayal, fury, hope. My tears smudged the ink, but in between the streaks was something new: strength. I could feel it building, fragile but real. "I will not be erased," I wrote, my hand steadying as the sentence formed. Not like Margaret, not like my mother. The next day, while rifling through a dusty shelf in the study, I found a worn Bible tucked behind rows of decorative books. Something about it felt different. When I opened it, a folded letter slipped out, yellowed with age. My breath caught as I unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable. My mother's. "Emily, if you are reading this, it means Vivian has won more ground than I hoped. Please know you are not imagining things. She has always wanted what isn't hers. Protect yourself. And never forget, the truth is your greatest weapon." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. My mother had seen it all, even then. She had tried to warn me across the span of years. Clutching the letter to my chest, I felt a spark ignite deep within me. Not just anger this time, but something stronger. My mother's voice, reaching out of the past, had given me permission to fight. And for the first time in my life, I believed I could win. The living room had been transformed into a courtroom. Relatives crowded into every corner, their faces tense, some curious, others hostile. Phones were set up on tripods, broadcasting the entire confrontation live. I stood at the center, my hands trembling but my back straight. For years, they had watched me crumble under Vivian's shadow. Tonight, they would see something different. I placed the stack of evidence on the table, a trail of receipts, bank statements, screenshots, and finally, the pharmacy invoice for the poison. Gasps rippled through the room. My Uncle Peter sat beside me, his stern face lending me strength. "This is a mistake," Michael snapped, stepping forward, his jaw tight. "You're twisting everything, Emily. You've always been jealous." "No," I said, my voice clear. "I've been erased, lied to, manipulated, but not anymore. These are her lies, not mine." All eyes turned to Vivian. She sat poised in her chair, her expression unreadable, her hands clasped neatly in her lap. Then, as the silence stretched, she broke into sobs. "You think I would ever hurt Emily?" she cried, her voice cracking perfectly for the cameras. Tears streaked her cheeks, her shoulders shaking as she buried her face in her hands. "I have loved her like my own. This," she gestured toward the papers, "this is her revenge against me because she has always felt unloved. Please, don't let her do this to our family." The tide shifted instantly. Whispers swept across the room. Some nodded sympathetically at her performance, their eyes narrowing at me. The live stream comments surged. "She looks so broken. Is Emily making this up? Poor Vivian." For a heartbeat, doubt clawed at me. But then Uncle Peter stood, holding up his phone. "There's one more thing," he said firmly. He played a video from the security camera, a clear shot of Vivian slipping something into my glass the night of the anniversary. The room fell silent. Vivian's face drained of color. The comments online flipped in an instant, caught red-handed. "She's been lying this whole time." My father's hands shook as he reached for a folded piece of paper I had placed on the table. His eyes scanned the handwriting, familiar and unmistakable. It was my mother's letter. His lips moved as he read aloud. "Emily, if you are reading this, it means Vivian has won more ground than I hoped. She has always wanted what isn't hers. Protect yourself." His voice cracked, the words breaking him apart. When he finished, the silence was unbearable. Vivian rose to her feet, her mask finally slipping. Her voice erupted in a raw scream. "If it weren't for Emily, everything would have been perfect." Her eyes darted wildly, her carefully built facade crumbling before the world. Relatives recoiled, horrified. My father dropped the letter, his face pale as he stared at the woman he had once defended above all else. Police officers, called earlier by Uncle Peter, stepped forward. Vivian fought them, her sobs turning into curses, her elegant dress tearing as she struggled. The live stream captured it all, the perfect stepmother revealed as a fraud. By the time they led her away in handcuffs, the hashtags were already trending. Ta justice for Emily, Ka the perfect mask falls. Viewers across the internet poured out their fury, their support, their disbelief. Michael staggered backward, his face pale. She promised me." His words died in his throat, realization dawning. He sank into a chair, his hands covering his face. He had been her pawn, his loyalty bought with false promises of inheritance. The truth broke him more than any accusation could. My father stood motionless, the letter still lying on the table at his feet. He looked at me, his eyes filled not with hatred now, but with something worse, regret. His voice was hollow when he finally spoke. "All these years, I chose wrong." I said nothing. The wound he had carved into me with his silence, his favoritism, his blindness, was too deep to be mended with a single confession. The room dissolved into chaos, relatives shouting, some comforting Michael, others filming every angle for the hungry audience online. I turned away from it all. The front door was open, the night stretching before me like an uncharted road. I walked toward it, the sound of the crowd fading behind me. For the first time, no one reached out to stop me, no one called me back. My heels clicked softly against the floor, steady and resolute. At the threshold, I paused only for a breath. My father's voice echoed faintly, but I didn't turn. I stepped outside, the cool night air wrapping around me, washing away the remnants of their world. I didn't look back, not once. The fallout was swift and relentless. Within days, headlines across the city carried my name. Stepdaughter vindicated as stepmother exposed for poison plot. Reporters called me the survivor, the woman who had been silenced for years but finally forced the truth into the light. For the first time, my voice mattered. Journalists who once might have ignored me now sought my side of the story, eager to show the contrast between the smiling family portraits and the venom lurking behind them. Strangers online poured messages into my inbox, some sharing their own stories of betrayal and gaslighting, others simply offering support. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, not as an outsider, not as the unwanted child, but as someone who had endured and stood tall. The storm that once threatened to drown me had carried me into a place of clarity. Relatives who had whispered against me at the anniversary party now arrived at my door, shame painted across their faces. Aunts who had rolled their eyes, cousins who had joined in Vivian's sneers. They all came, their apologies awkward but sincere. "We didn't know," they said. "We should have believed you." Their words did not erase the years of silence, but they were a small crack of healing. Then, one afternoon, Margaret visited again. She carried no bitterness, only a quiet heaviness. She sat across from me, her eyes warm. "There's something you should know," she said softly. Before your mother passed, she came to me. She asked me to watch over you if ever Vivian grew too powerful. I promised her I would. I couldn't stop everything, Emily, but when I saw what Vivian did to your glass that night, I knew I had to step in. I had promised her. The world seemed to slow. My chest tightened, tears stinging my eyes. All those years of feeling abandoned, alone, unwanted, yet, in her final days, my mother had thought of me, had tried to protect me in the only way she could. Margaret had been carrying that burden, waiting for the moment to fulfill her vow. I broke down, sobs racking through me. Margaret wrapped her arms around me, and I let myself collapse into her embrace. For the first time since my mother's death, I felt the warmth of being loved without condition. My tears fell freely, but this time they did not taste of despair. They were the release of years of silence, the breaking of chains. Life after Vivian's downfall was not instantly perfect. The scars remained. My father's hollow apologies could not stitch back the years he had chosen blindness over truth. Michael avoided me, drowning in his own shame, unable to meet my eyes. But for once, their judgment no longer defined me. I built something new. I rented a small apartment of my own, painted the walls in colors that felt alive, filled the rooms with books and music that spoke to me. I began writing publicly, sharing my story on platforms where others who had been silenced could find me. Messages flooded in. I thought I was alone. Your story saved me. You gave me courage. Each word reminded me that the pain I had carried could be transformed into something greater. I spoke at small gatherings, later at larger ones, about gaslighting, about the wounds that family can inflict when love is replaced by control. Each time I spoke, I felt lighter, stronger, freer. The revenge people expected never came. I didn't want to destroy Vivian further. Life, justice, and her own greed had already taken care of that. She sat in a prison cell now, stripped of her masks, her power, her audience. She had caged herself in the toxic walls she had built. I was the one who walked free. One evening, as the sun set through my apartment window, I wrote the final words of the story I had carried all my life. The greatest revenge is not destroying the villain, but living a radiant life of freedom while they remain imprisoned in their own darkness. I closed my journal, feeling something shift inside me. For years, I had lived in shadows, desperate for scraps of love. Now I understood. I didn't need their approval. I never had. What I needed was my own truth. I looked up at the camera set on my desk, the live stream ready to begin. My audience was waiting. I leaned closer, my eyes steady, my voice calm but piercing. "And what about you?" I asked, as if speaking to every unseen soul who had ever felt trapped. "Do you have the courage to walk out of your golden cage?" The silence that followed was powerful, stretching into the homes of strangers, filling the spaces where doubt once lived. I had found my voice, and I wasn't giving it back.